The biggest thing I can tell anybody is trust your instincts, trust that inner voice, and you are always your own best advocate. And if you feel like something might be wrong, check it out. The best option when you find out you have cancer, if there's anything I could probably shout to the rooftops, that would be get a second opinion. I mean, cancer is not always a death sentence. It's absolutely not. It will definitely make you reevaluate what's important in life. You need to remember what's the most important things in life. Work's not always it.
Ready? Ready to rock and roll? Is that action? All right. Okay.
That's right.
All right.
Absolutely. Go. Go. Go.
Hello, everybody. It's Jason Will with
Go. Go. Go.
This is a real estate podcast, but we talk about leadership, personal growth, and becoming the best version of yourself. Leadership, check 1, 2, check 1, 2. Growth, best version of yourself.
Go.
So this is a real estate podcast. Welcome back, everybody, to another super interesting and motivational and inspirational Impact Agent podcast. I am joined by Cindy Anderton. She is with Alabama Title here in Birmingham, and this is Cindy's first ever podcast. So welcome, Cindy.
Thank you for having me.
So Cindy, not only is this your first podcast, you admitted before we started recording that you don't even listen to podcasts.
I have not.
Have not, does not, but hopefully we can change that today. Now, I am passionate about getting people to share their stories. And you and I are in BNI together. And you did your presentation not too long ago and shared a very heartfelt story about your journey with cancer, right?
Yeah.
And I thought, well, gosh, we need to get an interview recorded to share with everybody that'll listen. Because what's important about, sharing your story, especially when you're in business, right? Because people don't necessarily care what you do. They care why you do it. And they also care about your story. So let's give a shout out to Alabama Title before we get started. And so you are very passionate about the company you work for. So tell us a little bit about the company and why your heart is in that so much.
It's a small family-owned company. They've been around since 1946. I started in 1996, so I've been there almost 26 years. And they've just been a wonderful company to work for. They're the oldest title company in Birmingham. I feel like we're just the best at what we do, and I work for the most experienced, helpful, wonderful people. So it's just the whole package.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Because loyalty to me is something that's rare or it seems to be becoming rarer and rarer in business. So when you meet people that are not only passionate about what they do, but also who they work for, it's inspiring. There's this law of attraction, right? And that's what we want to really kind of tap into here, because people, I guarantee you, there's going to be people that hear your story and that are just going to want to do business with you, no matter what it takes. And there's going to be people that thought they knew you that are going to see you in a different light. So I just want to encourage you during this interview to share up into your comfort level, but don't hold back because you're concerned about anything other than inspiring people that may be facing a diagnosis, may not even know they have cancer right now, but are about to, somewhere in the near future, find that out. And so I want you to take us through this journey of your symptoms, like how you started to know something was wrong, what happened, like what were the emotions that ran through you and through your mind when you received the diagnosis, and then just how you battled through it. So just take us through the whole thing.
Okay. It's a long story, so I don't want to get too long-winded. So almost 11 years ago, it was in the month of pink in October. I was walking through Walmart, and I guess seeing all the pink kind of made me stop and take note that I had felt a small lump and kind of dismissed it. And I think it made me rethink dismissing it. So the next day I called my OBGYN. They told me to come on in for a mammogram, which I did. And what I didn't know then was that they did my mammogram. I had what is called dense breast. And when you have dense breast, you should really get an ultrasound as well as a mammogram. Because what I didn't know at the time is that my knot did not show up on the mammogram. It only showed up on the ultrasound. So they saw it on the ultrasound, and they actually did a biopsy that day in office. And what I didn't know then is that that's not really normal. They usually call you back to do the biopsy, but they did it that day. And, there's God things that happen in your life. My husband was coaching with a guy, and his wife was a doctor. And I told her about it that weekend at the ball game. And had I really read her face, I would have known that that was cause for alarm, the fact that they kind of did my biopsy that day. And so she called me first thing Monday to see if I'd gotten my results back yet. And I had not. And in 20 years, my husband had never left work to go out of town, never worked out of town for work. And he was supposed to go to Texas. And I told him, I said, just go. I said, I feel like if you stay home, I'm claiming it. And I didn't want to claim it. So he went on to Texas. And I didn't get the call for another day. On Tuesday, about 10:30, I was riding down Highway 280, and I get the phone. I see it on my caller ID that it's my doctor. I pull over in the Chick-fil-A parking lot, and he said, there's no other way for me to say this, Cindy, than you have cancer. And to get that diagnosis, and especially, he said, I couldn't just tell you to come in, because if I told you to just come in, you would have known and worried. And he said, so I wanted to just go ahead and tell you. He did say, I've already got you an appointment with a surgeon. Can you come on now? And my sweet friend Lisa, who is also a doctor, my husband was out of town. She called me literally 2 minutes after I hung up with the doctors. I was sitting there just crying in the middle of Chick-fil-A parking lot. And she said, well, what's the plan? I said, they're sending me to a surgeon now. She said, I'll meet you there. And so we went to this surgeon's office, and she prayed with me. She reassured me. She was wonderful. But when we left, my friend Lisa said, well, I love her. I went to medical school with her, but I want you to get a second opinion. First, I met with the oncologist at that hospital. And when I met with that oncologist a few days later, he looked at me and just said, you have a 10 to 15% chance of survival.
Oh, my goodness.
And so to hear that was, I guess that's kind of earth-shattering at the time. Let's see, there's 3 basic different types of cancer. There's ER and PR positive, which are your hormone-driven cancers. I guess you would say people over 50 tend to get those. You can get them younger, but I was 37. The other type is called the HER2 new gene. So if you're HER2 positive, that's what drives your cancer. And I tested negative for all 3 of those. So they called the type of cancer I had triple negative cancer. It's probably the most aggressive and rare type of breast cancer. And at that time, they had gotten my reports back, and they knew that my cancer was growing at a rate of 93%. So it's called a Ki-67, but that tells you the rate at which your cancer cells are doubling. And mine was at a 93% rate. So that was all kind of not great news. But then my friend Lisa got me into another doctor. His name was Dr. Ferrero, and he's like the triple negative guru. He is known around the United States for the work he's done in the triple negative community. And he's been on like the San Antonio board for breast cancer, and he helps determine the golden treatment plans.
So where is he located?
He was at Kirkland Clinic, but he left about 2 years ago to go to Seattle and do research full time. So it was a hard nugget to lose him. But anyway, I think in deciding which doctor I love the first surgeon that I met, but then I go to UAB and it's a different, and things are probably different now. They change so often in the cancer world. But at the time, they had what was called a multidisciplinary clinic. So you meet with your surgeon, your radiologist, and your oncologist all in one visit. You don't do separate visits, and then they consult together to form the best treatment plan. And my tumor was so large, if your tumor is at the time was over 5 centimeters, they did surgery first, no matter what. Mine was like 4.8 centimeters. So I was right on the borderline. Most oncologists prefer you to do chemotherapy first, because if it's not working, they can switch the treatment plan. And if you do surgery first and you've already taken out the tumor, then they don't know if it's working or not. And I don't want to say anything that leads anybody to think I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, I'm just a patient that researched endlessly for weeks. So at the time, 2 of my doctors said surgery first, 2 of them said chemo first, but I wanted to do a trial drug at UAB. And in order to qualify for the trial drug, I had to do surgery first and then do chemotherapy in order to get the trial drug. That's just what the trial called for. And so that's inevitably what I chose to do. Did surgery first, and so 2 days before Thanksgiving in 2010, I had a single mastectomy first. They wanted to decrease the chances for infection and all kinds of problems that can occur after it, because I needed, according to the trial, to start it within 30 days. I needed to start my chemotherapy. So they did single mastectomy first, then I started chemotherapy 2 days before Christmas. And so we did the Red Devil, which is adriamycin, and it is truly what it sounds like. It's the Red Devil. It kicks your butt, and if there were all kinds of crazy side effects and all that kind of stuff. But so I did 6 months of chemotherapy, then radiation, and then a year later I did the other mastectomy and reconstruction. But through all of that, I just felt like God led me through so many doors. I don't think I would have ever left that first surgeon. And I hate that I'm going back on this. I'm circling back. But when I was trying to decide what to do, because all my doctors were at this first hospital. My children's doctors were there. My doctor was there. Just my general doctor was associated with that hospital. It was really hard to make the decision. But the surgeon called me 4 days before we were supposed to have surgery and said, I'm going to have an emergency appendectomy. So she said, I'm not going to be able to do your surgery. And that was like, I had been saying, God, I need a flashing sign.
Yeah.
And that was like my flashing sign. She said, I would never really send you to another, but I really think you need to go ahead and have surgery. And you've got a second plan, and I think you need to take it. And so that's kind of what led me to go to Kirkland, because this hospital, I knew people, and it was just a little harder to leave. And I felt like at the other hospital, maybe I might be just a number, but it was a wonderful experience. They were all fabulous, but the biggest thing I can tell anybody is trust your instincts, trust that inner voice, and you are always your own best advocate. And if you feel like something might be wrong, check it out, because if I had just waited, mine grew so fast. It was literally the size of a pea when I was first diagnosed, and by the time I had surgery, it was quadrupled in size.
Wow.
So,
and you didn't have any symptoms. Were you self-examining?
I do tend to self-exam because my mother had cousins that had breast cancer, and I had found a knot literally 1 year before. Went, had it tested, and it was nothing. They just said I had cystic breast, which is very common for women. So it's real easy to just rub it off as it's nothing. But this knot, it hurt. And that was another thing. People say cancer doesn't hurt. And triple negative is known to hurt, as to where other breast cancers may not. This one did.
So did you feel some irritation in the spot?
I did. I think that's what drew me to it, is it just hurt a little bit.
And I think one of the points you were making when I first heard you speak about this is for women that have dense breasts, the self-examination isn't as effective or an end-all be-all. Like you need to get in there and get tested on a regular basis. What did your life look like at 37? Did you have kids?
I did. I had a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old.
Holy cow.
So I think telling them was probably the hardest thing as a parent I ever had to do. Because kids just hear the word cancer and you think the worst. I think everyone does. I mean, cancer is not always a death sentence. It's absolutely not. But it will definitely make you reevaluate what's important in life.
Yeah. How do you maintain this brave face of hope when you've been given at most 15% chance of survival? Like you need to put on this hopeful front for your kids and your husband and everybody else. I feel like that's a burden that cancer patients kind of carry. I mean, they themselves end up a lot of times being the strong one. So I wonder, where do you find that strength?
God. That's the only place I can find it. And for those who don't know God, I don't know how you get through it, because I've never in my life been as close to God as I was then. You truly get to know Him. You think you know Him. The valleys are where you probably get to know Him the most.
I love that. So in that Chick-fil-A parking lot, did you call your husband as well? Was he your next call after the doctor call?
Yes.
And how did he take it?
Not well. He knew he shouldn't have went.
I was going to say.
And he got home as quickly as he could. It was rough because, the moms, I guess we say I'm one of the moms that handles a lot of things. I guess some husbands handle all the daily aspects of life, but I was pretty much his job didn't allow him there wasn't a lot of flexibility there. So I was the one kind of in charge of the kids and the getting and the doing. And it's amazing when things happen, how the roles can reverse so easily, though. He picked up, and when I found out, I'm doing all this research and there's no medicine for triple negative. There's no drug for that cancer because they don't know what causes it. So all I could do was, what else can I possibly do? And that was, I went organic and I went natural everything. I did alkaline water. I did, now whether they work or not, I don't know. But for me, I think it helped. I ate completely organic food and cut sugar and did all those things. And he cooked every single meal. And I don't know what I would have done without him.
That's awesome. It sounds like, a very stern recommendation for you to people out there that are going to find out that they're going to go through this or that are currently going through it now is they need to get a second opinion.
Absolutely. Because at least back then, and even my new doctor said, surgery is not always your best first option. My mother was actually diagnosed 2 years later, and the first thing they wanted to do before they even got her report back was plan surgery. And I'm like, Mom, we don't know what kind you even have yet. Surgery is not the best option when you find out you have cancer. If there's anything I can probably shout to the rooftops, that would be get a second opinion.
And do your research.
Do your research.
Like I heard you very strongly. I mean, that was a very strong point that I heard.
And I know that drives some doctors crazy when you come in and you've done your Google searches and such. But I really dove into medical journals, not just things that I found flying out on the internet.
I think we just say, all right, this person went to school. They, have dedicated their life to this craft. We should just automatically trust them or automatically trust that they're the person for the job, right? And that's not always the case because you found the triple negative guru through this second opinion process.
I did. I really did. I felt like I hit the lottery. And I know there are a lot of great doctors out there, but I would say trust your instincts. And to me, doctors are, I don't want to get in trouble for saying this with someone, but I think they're highly educated body mechanics. And I think sometimes they really are making the best guess that they can make when they don't know exactly what's wrong.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think they would agree with that statement. But what about this perspective? So this altered perspective on maybe what's important in life, what you value more, what you were taking for granted that you now don't. I'd like to hear what were the big perspective shifts that you had? And one thing I'm super curious to know is, have you been able to hold on to this new perspective? Because, you're healthy now, today, you've been healthy for a long time, right? And so, life gets in the way. Life is just great, grand distractor. So walk us through that part for a minute.
It absolutely stopped me in my tracks. And you know as well as I do how this business can kind of take your life over, and you really have to take time to focus on what's most important. Because we want to provide for our families, and that's a huge part of loving your families, is being able to provide and give them and do the things you want to do with them. But at the end of any day, you have to realize it's not the number one thing. They want you here, and your presence is much more important most time than your presence, not your gifts, I guess you could say.
Well, what ran through my mind was presence over provision, really. At the end of the day, it's not all about the stuff. It's about the time.
It's about the time.
That's what I heard.
That's all your kids want from you. They want your time. They'll remember, like the day I told them, this sounds crazy, we went ding-dong ditching that night just to boost their mood, I called all the friends. I told them what we were doing, and they had applied. I mean, there were 7, 5, and 3, and it got their spirits up. So the day I did my last radiation treatment, we went ding dong ditching again. It was just something fun to do to get it off their mind, and they still remember it though.
Oh, I love it. Well, so how have you been able to stay grounded, or have you been able to stay grounded?
I think I was for a long time, and then life gets in the way again, and sometimes you have to regroup. And it's good to do things like this and to tell your story, because you need to remember. You need to remember what's the most important things in life, and work's not always it.
Yeah. What about, first of all, how long was this journey?
It literally took, so I was diagnosed in October and surgery in November. Chemo started in December. Chemo lasted until May. And then in June, radiation lasted until July. And then I did a year break and then did the other side and reconstruction. So it was 2.5 years.
Wow.
And I mean, but when you're diagnosed with cancer, you're going to be at the hospital just about every week for a year, if not multiple times a week for a year. It's just a long process, and it's exhausting. And the mental exhaustion was worse for me than the physical. And that's why I think just getting in the Word was my only savior, because your mind will go crazy. I didn't want to leave my babies.
Yeah. It's interesting, too. I like to bring people kind of back to, the faith-based part of this, because some people do the opposite. They turn away, and it's like, why me? Why is this happening to me? I've always been faithful. I've always been a good child and woman and mom and wife, and I don't deserve this. So I think it's important for people to hear that, for you, it only got stronger instead of wavering.
It did. Why not me? Why not anyone? And it was hard because I went through chemo with a lady. We had the same exact diagnosis. And a year later, she passed away, and I didn't. And then you have something that's called survivor's guilt, because you've gone through it. They went through the exact same thing you did. Why did I survive and she didn't? And it's tough. And there's lots of questions I have for God when I get there.
In terms of the mastectomy part of it, that's got to be, there's so many challenges here along the way. It's, you've really got to, I would think, like constantly be kind of talking yourself up. How difficult was that?
Now, the first one was very difficult. So if you don't believe mind over matter is a thing, it is. And I can prove that, because the first one, my head was in such a bad place. I really didn't think I would survive, only by the grace of God that I did. And the recovery was tough. The second one, when they took off the second one, plus did reconstruction and some other things, it was a much tougher surgery. It was a 14-hour surgery. And I came through it with flying colors. And it's because my head was in a better place. Because at that point, I truly believed I was going to live. And the first time I didn't. So it was just completely just mindset.
Is there anything, or were there any specific mindset exercises or anything that you can recommend? Or are you just strictly going back to prayer and the Word?
Prayer and the Word. Use it as your sword. It was all I lived on. There were nights I didn't sleep, and all I did was sit and read all night. And I don't know what people do without their faith. I really don't.
It's an interesting question, because a lot of people go through this without it. Some people come through the other side with it, with having gained it through the process. I interviewed another person on this podcast who's an agent in my office in Fairhope, and I think he was given, it's been a while since we had our interview, but it was like 5%. And he actually was on his deathbed. He was curled up in a fetal position. The doctors were like, you have minutes to live. And his family was all by his side, and he came through that. And there's nothing that can disrupt his faith to this day. He was a faithful person prior to that, but it was more like kind of robotic, kind of going with the motions, like this is what I need to do instead of, what I get to do. And so it was very inspirational to hear his story. But I think at 37, your perspective on this has to be a lot different than if you're like 67.
Absolutely. My doctor had just started a triple negative support group, and that was huge because so many women in the groups I initially met, they were over 60. And going through this, like you said, in your late 60s is much different than going through it in your 30s. And I needed to meet people that were my age that were going through it, because having little ones at home is much different than having your kids married and off. And I even went through chemo with a 21-year-old. So, I mean, her perspective, so much different. And we're all we had a tight little group. We were all diagnosed about the same time, and we all still get together and talk. Thank goodness we're all still here.
How's your diet? Are you still eating clean?
I would love to say that I still eat clean, because I did it for about 4 years. And it's a hard wagon to stay on.
Yeah, it is.
It's expensive. You've got to and I say it's expensive. It's really no more expensive because I didn't eat out as much. I truly prepared most of our meals. But it takes preparation. It takes planning. You know how life is, especially with 3 kids. It's harder to plan. I just, in the last 6 months, started going back and just started eating clean again. And 35 pounds has come off. So, and
well, there's a testament.
Yeah, it did the same thing then. I lost so much weight during chemo, and so many people gain weight because they pump you full of steroids. But just eating clean and cutting the sugar, it makes a huge difference in the way you feel. I don't know if it did a thing towards cancer or not, but my doctors all supported it. So.
And you got to go back. How often do you have to go back for screening?
I did go back every 6 months. They released me last year, which is a nerve-wracking feeling.
Yeah. What is the emotional, kind of mindset around that?
There's happiness, and then there's the fear that sneaks in every now and again, because I liked getting my blood work done. Some doctors believe in the blood work, some don't. I know you can get false high numbers, and or you can have high numbers and it not mean a thing. You can have low numbers and it could still be back. But I really liked getting my blood work done.
Just for that assurance.
Yes.
Yeah, like I'm clean, I'm still healthy, I'm still good. Well, what age, as we kind of close here, what age would you recommend that women start to get the screenings?
I think insurance probably doesn't start paying for it until they're 40. I'm not 100% on that, but I would say do your self-exams always. I would say tell your teenage daughters, know their breast. Do the self-exams. You can look them up on the internet, how you're supposed to do them. But no, because like I said, I did chemo with a 21-year-old and many, many people under 30. It's not unnormal for it to happen.
And maybe know what you're genetically predisposed for.
Absolutely.
Would be a good thing.
Because I have the genetic test ran and I was negative. It's called the BRCA gene. I was negative for the gene, but my mother was diagnosed, like I said, with breast cancer 2 years later. Hers was the hormone-driven kind, which is what many women after menopause and they've taken hormones, that's what drives the cancer. But the doctor also said, we only know these things to test for genetically right now. 20 years from now, that's going to be doubled, tripled.
Right.
He said, so the likelihood that yours is genetic is probably pretty high.
Well, if people have questions about this, can they reach out to you? I mean,
Absolutely.
how should they send you a Facebook message? Or,
yes.
And then, of course, if they need some title work done, if you're if you're a real estate agent listening, or maybe somebody trying to sell their home on their own, maybe somebody that's just trying to prepare their home for sale and they've got, I don't know, they just need clear title. I mean, there's a lot of things that your company, a lot of services they provide.
Absolutely. Whatever needs to be done. And I'll even help you try to clear the title issues.
And so is there an email address or something they can reach you on for title work?
Cindy, CINDY at alabamatitle.com.
Oh, that's super easy. Well, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your story. I know this is not an easy thing to talk about. I mean, people listening can't see the emotion on your face, but it's so there. But I think this was so informative and so inspirational, and I just love the faith-based component. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Impact Agent Podcast. If you like the show and got something out of it, please like the Impact Agent Podcast on Facebook and rate and review the show on iTunes or anywhere you listen to podcasts. This really helps us grow the show and helps other agents find it. Please share it with your friends and coworkers as well. You want us to deliver the show to you via email every week? Then email me at jason@impactagentuniversity.com and we'll send you the show every week. Please let us know what you think about the show, what you like, what you don't, or possibly make a suggestion about a topic you want to hear. Email me at jason@impactagentuniversity.com or leave us a message on Facebook at Impact Agent Podcast. Until next week, everybody be productive, safe, and happy, and always keep learning. This podcast is produced by Johnny Gwynn at Deep Fried Studios in Mobile, Alabama, and is paid for and powered by ImpactAgentUniversity.com.